When considering a supplement, ask yourself two questions. First, does it work? And the second one is this supplement safe? If you've already answered those two questions, the next one would be, how do I take this supplement to maximize its benefits? Creatine is a molecule that your body synthesizes and that you also ingest with some foods like red meats, poultry, and seafood. 95% of creatine, where is it? It's in the muscle. The muscle is something like the storage for creatine, and 2/3 of all the creatine you store in the muscle. It is found in the form of phosphocreatine. What is this phosphocreatine? Very easy. It's a phosphorus molecule attached to the creatine molecule, and this is essential to fulfill its function, as we will see now. Interestingly, creatine comes from kris, the Greek word for meat, referring to where creatine is found in the muscle. In the muscle of the animals you eat, or in your own muscle because you are also an animal. As we explained in a recent video, if you understand the main function of creatine, you will understand most of its benefits. Creatine is an adenosine triphosphate regenerator. It regenerates adenosine triphosphate, the molecule that stores energy in all our cells. Adenosine triphosphate is consumed and needs to be regenerated. The P in adenosine triphosphate stands for phosphorus, the A in adenosine triphosphate stands for adenosine, and the T stands for tri, as in 3. When it is used up, adenosine triphosphate turns into adenosine diphosphate. It transforms into adenosine diphosphate, which is exactly the same. But instead of the T, we find the P, because this means di, as in 2. That is, there are 2 phosphorus in this molecule and 3 phosphorus in this molecule. Earlier I told you that 2/3 of creatine is stored as phosphocreatine. And here's the key to creatine, because what phosphocreatine does is donate a phosphorus to adenosine diphosphate so that it can be transformed back into adenosine triphosphate, which is the carrying molecule. Energy is the currency of energy exchange, and this is key. This is key in tissues that consume a lot of energy. Think about what those tissues are. The muscle well taught. In the muscle, creatine increases your muscle contraction capacity and your muscle strength, which makes you train more and with more intensity. And it's these changes in training that ultimately translate into an increase in muscle mass, and not the other way around. Many people think that creatine first increases your muscle mass, and that's what makes you perform better. No, or not entirely, because there are also indirect mechanisms that make creatine itself increase your muscle mass. For example, one of those mechanisms is the following. Creatine draws water into the cell and somehow swells it. This happens in the muscle cell. The muscle cell swells. It's an increase in intracellular water, not an increase in extracellular water. And this is very important because fluid retention, which is the popular term for what we know in medicine as that increase in extracellular volume, is not caused by creatine. Creatine doesn't cause fluid retention by increasing water outside cells. Instead, it volumizes cells by increasing the volume inside them. But this is very interesting because this increase in intracellular volume is a mechanical stimulus for muscle cells. It increases intracellular volume, and this is a mechanical stimulus that increases hypertrophy in muscle cells. Your muscle cells, the myocytes, interpret that they must grow, and this facilitates muscle hypertrophy. Another tissue that consumes a lot of energy is the heart, and for this reason creatine is being investigated as a molecule that can prevent certain cardiovascular disorders. But, of course, if you've thought about tissues that are metabolically active and consume a lot of energy, you've surely thought of the brain, the central nervous system, and it's true, among those we're going to talk about today, it's probably the most metabolically active. It's well known that the creatine content, look at the brain, decreases as we age, as the years go by. And it's being used as support in people who are beginning to have cognitive decline. Precisely for this reason, because it is capable of giving energy to neurons that are suffering or beginning to suffer, preventing a greater and faster cognitive decline. Interestingly, creatine buffers the effects of lack of sleep on attention and cognitive performance. So if you ever have a bad night's sleep and have an exam the next day or a medical shift or have to pilot a plane on a transoceanic flight, don't hesitate to supplement with creatine because it's going to be very useful. And now let's get to the heart of the video's matter. What is the best way to supplement with creatine? How do I take creatine? What's the best dose for quick results? Should it be taken daily or just on workout days? Is creatine more interesting in adults over 50 years old than in young people, or is it equally interesting? We will answer all these questions based on this recent meta-analysis, a new study, so stay until the end to know the answers. This study is conducted in adults over 50. And they train strength, and this is key, they train strength about 2-3 times a week. The doses of creatine range between 3 and 9.5 grams of creatine per day. And the duration of most of the studies analyzed in this meta-analysis was 8 to 12 weeks, which is usual in this type of studies. These are the characteristics of the study, remember them. The first conclusion of this new study is that in all participants there was a slight but significant increase in lean mass, that is, in muscle mass and strength, both in the upper body, something that was measured by doing a maximum repetition of bench press, as in the lower body, which was measured by seeing a maximum repetition of the leg press. Therefore, more muscle mass and strength in the upper body and in the lower body. Well, that's the first conclusion that is consistent with the previously known results of creatine, only that it is usually studied in younger people, in athletes between 20 and 40 years old. This population, remember, is made up of adults, both women and men, but over 50 years old. Interestingly, the higher doses, those that went from 5 grams upwards, doses higher than 0.176 ounces daily of creatine, improved leg strength more than arm strength. Perhaps this happens because we have the most muscle mass in our legs. And we need more creatine to saturate the creatine stores in these muscles, which are generally larger and more powerful. But interestingly, when they analyzed certain subgroups of patients, loading with 20 grams of creatine during the first 5 to 7 days of the first week of supplementation, in summary, yielded better results. And this is the second conclusion, and the conclusion, let's say, with more weight from the video and the study. Loading with 20 grams during the first week yielded better results for those who did that loading in the first week. They managed to fill the muscle stores of creatine in a week compared to the 4 weeks needed for the usual doses, which range between 3 to 5 grams a day, approximately. This means several things. First, grab paper and pencil, which is very important. Many people do not see immediate results with the usual doses of creatine, and what they do, well, they stop being consistent with the supplementation before saturating or filling the creatine stores. If they get bored, saying it doesn't work for them, they quit, not seeing the point or results in it. We are often very impatient, wanting results immediately. Now I take something and half an hour later I'm training and I have to notice the results. Much of clinical and sports supplementation differs. Stay patient and engaged. However, the final result is the same. But that is whether you load creatine with 20 grams a day for a week or whether you take the maintenance dose of 3 grams or 5 grams. In the long run, the final result is the same. It's just that you're going to take more or less time to get to that result. And also, there are no side effects described for taking a higher initial dose. Studies have been done with creatine doses much higher than those of this study, and also for much longer. Therefore, safety should not be a limiting point with creatine. Finally, keep in mind that it is true that there is a percentage of non-responders in the population that in some studies reaches up to 20%. Although I fear that many of these would fall into the first category, those people who get bored and are not consistent with supplementation. And also, something that is the third conclusion of the study is that they hypothesize in this study, something that seems to me a very nice, very good hypothesis, that perhaps taking creatine 60 minutes before training would improve the results. Notice that this is a recommendation that contradicts previous recommendations about creatine that I have always given you, and I have always told you that creatine can be taken at any time of the day because it works by saturation, that is, it gradually accumulates in the muscle. The study hypothesizes that the timing of taking it, whether before training, in the morning on an empty stomach, or at the end of the day, doesn't impact its effectiveness. That's why science is alive, that's why you have to read and update, because everything is changing. The hypothesis it launches is the following. When taking creatine before training, It seems that physical exercise, by increasing vasodilation and a series of changes that occur at the muscular level, facilitates the entry of creatine into the muscles. And for that reason, those who took it in the hour before training ended up with more exercise adaptations because they increased their creatine levels in the muscle more and faster. Finally, do I have to take creatine only on training days, or do I have to take it daily? The most effective approach is to take creatine daily, both on training and non-training days. Here's why. Because I said so. It works by saturation and you'll take longer to reach optimal creatine levels in your muscle. If you only take it the 2 or 3 or 4 days that you train, compared to if you take it daily continuously. What are the conclusions of this video and this study? First, is creatine monohydrate as efficient in adults over 50 years old in improving strength and muscle mass as it is in younger people? Therefore, age is no limitation for creatine supplementation. Second, do a creatine load by taking up to 20 grams the first week before switching to a maintenance dose of about 3 to 5 grams. In the long term, it's a simple way to see results faster and start benefiting from them. Finally, perhaps the most revolutionary aspect of the video. There are preliminary data that taking creatine about 60 minutes before training would maximize the intake of creatine into the muscles and the saturation of muscle creatine, improving results. However, more studies and evidence are needed to confirm this.